We the People. We've got a special guest here today that many of you already know. He's been a guest on the show before. Retired probate judge Bob KILLIAN. He's going to be talking to us about what is Chapter 9 bankruptcy and what does it mean for us as a city, and is it a viable option to get us back on a good financial footing.
Right.
So we'll be talking about that. First,
Yeah. So-
Hyacinth has 6 seconds for her
Hello,
announcements.
everyone out there. It's Monday. I hope you're all doing well today. It's a beautiful day out, I can say that for sure, right, Judge?
Sure is.
Okay, then. So I hope you're doing all well. All right, just quick announcement for the South End Wellness Senior Center. Okay, so today's Monday, so today's gone already. I just wanted to give you a little update on our lunch menu here. Tomorrow we're having baked chicken with mashed potato and corn. The next day is meatball and what goes on with meatball. Stuffed cabbage, and Thursday, Friday, it's beef, whatever they call it. So again, don't forget now, the South End Wellness Senior Center, you want to get yourself involved, stay in shape. We usually have aerobics on Monday, Thursday, and Friday. Please come on over, and there's a lot of other information. Next Monday, the center will be closed, okay? Next Thursday, the 12th, we're also having our Heritage Week, where there's a lot of different culture and food that matches our culture come to play, and we'll all have a good time. So please join us at the South End Wellness Center, 830 Maple Avenue. All right, then.
Okay, before we jump into it with the judge, I just want to take a second and just remember the people that were killed in Las Vegas
Should
this
have
morning.
a moment of silence.
When I left the house, the count was up to 58 people that have been killed and over 400 that have been injured, and the number of killed is expected to rise.
But
So
it's
take a
sad.
moment to think about them. And also, as the governor asked the people of Nevada to do, I would ask people here to do, if you see a first responder or a police officer or anybody that wears a badge, thank them for what they do for us. The number of people killed in Nevada is much less because of the first responders' quick response than it could have possibly been if this guy was allowed to continue on his rampage.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump right into it now. Someone that, I had and I call it an honor, not because you're sitting here, I had the honor of meeting a
I'll
few
see
years
how long
ago.
the honor you for.
That's it.
right?
That's right.
I've been in Hartford for quite a few years, not nearly as long as Judge KILLIAN and his family, but I had the honor to meet him a few years ago. We've become good friends since then. And he may not appreciate me saying this, but he's also become my voice of reason in a lot of things, where he keeps me grounded. We spend a lot of time talking, and one of the issues like bankruptcy, a year or so ago, I was dead set against it. Until you actually listen to what it means, what the reasoning behind it, and I've started to think now that it's the way to bring Hartford around back to a stable financial footing. It may sound bad. A lot of people think bankruptcy, it's terrible if I declared bankruptcy in my private life. People say, he's a deadbeat, whatever. But it's a way to turn things around. And we're going to talk about a lot of the issues we have between, and unions aren't necessarily our biggest problem, but there's a lot of things that we need to look at. And bankruptcy is a tool for us to rein some of those things in. And I'll let Bob.
And I'm really glad to hear you admit that is it. So, now you can't blame Luke for saying, he wants to go bankrupt, right? I am so glad to hear you say that you have turned around.
We won't get into Luke. I want to stay in the factual
He went in and saw
world.
the problem there, and this was his answer to making us better. And he's not only looking at 2 years or 4 years, he's looking beyond, even if he's not a mayor anymore. But he is looking beyond because we are in bad conditions.
Let's say when he actually does something and gets moving,
Judge.
then we'll give him credit for it.
Yeah.
But to talk and talk and talk and do nothing is making no change.
All right, well, let's hear
all
from
it's
the
doing
judge.
is kicking the can further down the road.
I know. Let's
So,
hear what Judge have to
let's-
say about the
You
implementation.
came prepared with your professor's.
I made a chart.
Vest.
I call it Bob's boring bullets. And it's because I know nobody likes to look at hard numbers and talk. But if you want to know where we're going to go and where we want to be, you have to know where we're starting, where we're here. And it's not Luke's fault. Frankly, it's not Pedro Segarra's fault. It's not Mike Peters' fault. It's not any of the leaders of our city's fault. They all did at their time what they had to do to have the city survive, to live and fight another day. We take on incredible burdens that no other city in Connecticut has. And I mean that. Not one other city in Connecticut has the burdens we have. And we have, like all the other cities in Connecticut, one tool to pay for what we do, and that's the property tax. And the property tax doesn't work for Hartford and about 14 other communities in Connecticut. It's working fine for New Haven. It's working for Bridgeport, not quite as well. It works terrifically well for Stamford. West Hartford has a larger taxable grand list than we have by about 31%. That's incredible. West Hartford has 60,000 people or something thereabouts. We have 124,000 people, and they have 150% of the taxable grand list that we have. We have almost an identical taxable grand list with 5 other communities around us, ranging from Glastonbury to Farmington, and they have nowhere near the
Can you say we
responsibilities.
have too many towns in Connecticut?
No, I
No?
mean, we have.
Everybody wants to have their own?
We would still have the same problem. I mean, look, if we were the size of Stamford, Connecticut, Farmington would be part of our city. That's a reality. You know, they're about 29 square miles.
Yeah.
We're really about 16 and a half square miles. We pick up another mile that's all in the Connecticut River. That doesn't do much for us. And there's a story about that, but I won't even go there. Here's our problem. We have total income of about $545 million. I'm not offering these figures as the absolute truth of where they are. These are actually last fiscal year's figures. We don't even know yet what the total income is for the current fiscal years. These were the estimates on which the 2017 budget were made. We get about $267 million from the state, a little bit from the federal government, and that leaves us with a responsibility to balance a budget to raise $278 million, and we have to do that almost exclusively with the property tax. All the other income that we get on our own, licenses and inspections fees, our share of the recording charges when you sell real estate, the conveyance taxes, fines for a library book that's overdue,
Right.
or fine.
But
All
those
the other
things
things
don't carry.
are peanuts.
Yeah.
You know, last week they announced that they were getting more aggressive with the parking
Yeah.
meters. 2 weeks ago, they announced they were going to try to collect more from the handicapped. You know, it's crazy because all of that does, pennies
Nickel and dimes us.
toward this. And it deludes people into thinking that there's an easy route to making up our losses. Now, there's the amount. We get $260 million from our property tax. So everything else is, when it works, is not $18 million, it's $9 million, because to balance it, we tossed in the $9 million from our reserve fund. So when you raise then another $19 million with all these other income sources, we come up with our share, our $278 million. And here's where it goes. Education, of course, is the big number.
Yeah.
51% of the money we take in goes to education.
And why is it that
51%.
we have the lowest graduation rate, that people actually going off
That's
and
the
doing
way-
anything?
that's the way we spend the money, that's
You
the
know,
problem.
I'm not being,
Okay.
when I talk here, I'm not gonna talk about
Okay.
whether our police department is doing a great
Right,
job or a
right.
fire department, I think they both do.
Yeah.
I'm talking about just money.
The nuts
This
and
is
bolts.
where
money
it goes.
and why we have to have a bankruptcy. 15% or $84 million goes to the police, the fire, and the emergency services. So right off the top, and that's down significantly from where it was a couple of years ago. We've cut the police and the fire and the, there have been some give backs, but not much in terms of where we're going. That's 66% of our money. Most of the money that goes to the police, fire, and emergency services, like most of the money we spend every place, is for salaries. That's the big item
course,
on
we know
all
that.
of this.
Salaries and benefits, right?
No,
Yes, salary.
this is exclusive of benefits.
Okay.
That comes up as another number later. But yeah, they're part of the huge cost that we have. But is there any sane person who really thinks we can significantly reduce our expenditures on police and fire? There are areas where we can have some savings. If I were to tell you that maybe we could save, maybe 5 to 6% with cuts, if we paid people less, yeah, maybe. Remember,
But
we
you
don't
have to
pay.
be
We don't
competitive,
pay.
though.
We're not competitive in some of our
We have to
salaries
get
now.
competitive.
Some of those communities like Glastonbury and West Hartford pay their cops more than we do. And I would vastly prefer being a cop in Glastonbury than a cop in Hartford.
Right, right.
I mean, that's like,
That's
that's
fair.
like a vacation week.
Yes, I know.
So we got, being realistic, maybe you could trim that number with benefits and salary givebacks. Maybe you could do it with 5 or 6%, but I doubt it. You know, Public Works, it's another $12 million. First we forgot administrative services. That's finance and OMB and what we spend on family and children and recreation centers and that sort of thing. That's 2.25%. We've gone from 51%, from 15% to 2.25% of our total Hartford budget. And then we go down, Public Works is 2%, Health and Human Services is under 1%, Development Services is about 0.5%, the appointed and elected officials, 1% of all of it. You can argue whether we're getting our money's worth for that, but the fact of the matter is the delta between what we're spending and the optimum amount that maybe we should be spending is peanuts. It's like raising the parking meter money. Hartford Public Library, there's been a lot of talk on your blog about the Hartford Public Library. $7.8 million, that's 1.5% of the city's budget, more than the appointed and elected officials get, but they run. Appointed and elected officials just sit there at City Hall and make decisions. They run a business.
Right.
And what could you do? I mean, I've seen criticisms of some salaries. Maybe $160,000, wasn't there one for like that amount of money is too much? Maybe it should be $120,000. The delta is $40,000. The difference is $40,000. All told, these expenditures, which basically are operational expenditures, cost 23.5% of our budget. Non-operating expenses,
You did your homework over the weekend, I see.
yeah,
Yes,
I
you did.
wrote it all down. I did this homework 2 years ago, but now I just updated the numbers and wrote it down. Non-operating expenses, $36 million, 6% of the total. That includes $11 million to the MDC, $3,000 for our dump fees, and then settling lawsuits, which is out of
It's
sight
always
right now.
out of control.
Out of sight. I mean, they're just, the number that's in there, I think, was $2.7 million. I think one case was $5 million. It's on appeal, but it's $5 million. That also has the special events, leases, and we lease vehicles, and we lease some real estate. Our most expensive leased real estate is at Constitution Plaza. But the total's 6% of what we spend. And then we get to benefits and insurance, and that's 13.5% of the money that we raise and spend. And pensions is another 5.5%. Debt service, in and of itself, $45 million a year is 6.5%. And here's the danger, that's gonna raise. It's gonna go up every year
That we
until
don't pay.
2021, whether we pay it or not. It has a bump in 2021 when that $45 million is gonna go up to $61 million.
Wow.
Now, how does our debt service compare to other cities our size? Let's say New Haven or Bridgeport.
Our debt service is much larger than other cities. You know, we have about over $750 million in debt. And our debt service, we have refunded costs money,
Right.
but because it spreads it out over a longer period, but you still pay it.
Yeah.
You still pay it, you just pay it. We're still paying on debts that should have been paid off 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And then, but we're high in this area. Not crazy high, but high.
But
Hartford
we're
spends
still the
about
highest.
Hartford spends about $2,500 per person in the city of Hartford, and that's identical to what New Haven spends, and a little bit less than what Bridgeport spends. But Bridgeport has 20,000 more people. It's a lot less than West Hartford spends per capita, per head. So we're not profligate spenders. We don't spend money in the old politically incorrect statement like drunken sailors. And my apologies to
drunken sailors.
drunken sailors. The fact of the matter is that our spending, there's always room to cut. But in my judgment, if you look at everything that we have, there maybe there's another 5% that you could cut. And based on, I'm talking non-education expenditures. And I think there may be more than that in the education.
Maybe
budget.
like, instead of renting that big fat building down there and Main Street, we could actually use one of these empty buildings that we have. That is also costing a lot of money.
You know, it's possible. Yeah, we don't have a lot of empty resources that don't need significant work in order to get them ready for somebody else. But, you know, I don't argue with it. There's money to be saved in every aspect of government. But to kid yourself that it's going to make a difference, I think is really kidding yourself.
Okay.
Here's the results. We got expenditures. That's the projection going out to 2022, a 5-year projection. And we got income, and that's our projections for income. And that leaves us on this chart with a gap of almost $77 million. And that's really a wishful thinking, because this year, a year when we were predicting a deficit of $37 million, we're gonna be closer to $60 million.
Yeah.
So these numbers are further skewed, but the income estimates are pretty good, because we know, as long as they're paid, what the taxes that are gonna be assessed are.
Right.
So why is
This
there
is
such a...
this is the number, frankly, that we've got to do something structurally about. If we save 10% on everything that we're currently spending, that's $26 million. So we still have to do something in excess of $50 million to bring these numbers down so they track.
So let me ask you something. So say we go bankrupt now. What happened to all this money that we might be owing, you know, from defer years and years ago? Does it just go away, or it just, you know, like a credit when you have a credit problem and you go into bankruptcy? Okay, sometimes it can be forgiven if you cannot, you know, how does this work? I'm really kind of curious.
Both. The answer is, here's what a Chapter 9 does. You know, there are various Chapter 11, Chapter 7. There's all these chapters in the bankruptcy, and they're all for specific tasks.
Reason, okay.
Chapter 9 is exclusively for municipalities. And it came about the time of the Depression because there were a lot of municipalities going bankrupt. And it was carefully crafted because a municipality is a creature of a sovereign state. And the federal courts and the Federal Bankruptcy Act can't take over
That.
the governmental function
Mhm.
for a state or or one of its municipalities. That's why the governor has a role in deciding whether we go bankrupt. He has to give us permission because we operate under his general charter as the governor of a sovereign state. So the mayor must request it and the governor has to approve it. That's the law, the federal law. That's actually the Connecticut law. Now, different states, some states require the legislature to approve it, thank God ours doesn't.
Just a question, Bob. Going back to your previous chart, with the gap between income and spending. What causes that disparity? Is it cost of living increases, increase in benefits? Why does it,
Sure.
why does it
Healthcare.
jump so much?
Sure.
And how do we keep that in line?
You know, this problem started when we were paying probably about $1.04 a gallon for gas. And this morning I filled up, it was $2.79 a gallon. You know, it's a long time getting there. We kept bonding with the belief, Connecticut has done the same thing, by the way. Connecticut has the highest per capita bonded indebtedness in the nation right now. And I suspect we have the highest per capita bonded indebtedness in Hartford, or in Connecticut. We're something like $47,000 ahead right now. So if we passed the hat and everybody came up with $4,700, the problem's resolved.
So even if the state said, okay, we're gonna come and we're gonna, help you with this year budget item, or maybe next year budget item, that still ain't gonna help, because you're still deferring issues.
We're not solving anything.
Right.
We're kicking the can down the road.
All right.
Government is terrific at that.
Yeah.
So what tools will a bankruptcy filing give us to fix this problem and keep it from repeating year after year?
Number one thing I want to point out is it does not remove the negotiations or the governmental decision-making from the mayor and the council.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a big concern, that we'll give up our power.
We give up no power to come up with a plan. The goal of Chapter 9 is for the city to produce a plan which it can present to the bankruptcy court and assert this will solve our problem. Not this will get us through to next November, or this will get us through to a year from August. This will solve our long-range
Okay, now,
problem.
you just said something here that I don't think a lot of people understand, and I didn't until you explained the whole process to me a while back. But it's not like you go into bankruptcy court and a judge says slash this, this, and this. You go into him with a plan and say, this is how we're gonna accomplish this and get us back to where we need to be.
The federal court, exactly right. The federal court loans us the tools of bankruptcy. We can stay payments. We can do things that, we can stop lawsuits against us for payments.
When you say state payment,
Stop them
okay.
for
all
the
right.
time being.
Okay.
And then the bankruptcy court will give us a period of time to produce a plan that we present to the court. During that period of time, it will stay payments. It will require payments for ongoing purchases and services, but it will stay the payments for example, bondholders and other people during the pendency of this action. The 18 months, the 18-month period of time is the time during which we use the bankruptcy tools, which includes the stay, the ability to call people to a negotiation, the ability to reopen contracts. A bond is a contract, so is a salary contract with the city.
Yeah.
Will give us an opportunity to work out a plan that we believe is gonna work. When the city approves a plan, and the city is the council and the mayor, it's gonna have to present it to the judge, and that's a chance for all the stakeholders, the unions, the bondholders, somebody who has a lease with the city, that big lease that you're concerned about on Main Street. I don't even know for sure what building that is, but I believe you. You're usually right on things. And all those things, all those individuals and corporations and businesses will have an opportunity to say, this is an unfair plan, and here's why. The judge determines, A, that it has a good chance of working, and B, that it is or isn't fair to all the stakeholders. He can say, you're asking too much of the pensioners, or you're asking too little of the pensioners. And I'm not gonna approve this plan because you're taking too much for them, too little for them.
Right.
He can, but then send you back to negotiate.
No, she good. Yeah.
Ultimately, In Detroit, the most famous of recent vintage of all these bankruptcies, but not the only one, the fact of the matter is that the bankruptcy court finally approved a plan that was achieved through a mediation between the city and all the stakeholders. And that plan called I call these the targets, because they're the only areas where you can save money. I mean, you know, so here's pilot, that's a target, but the bankruptcy court can't order the state of Connecticut to increase pilot. Here's education, that's a target, but the bankruptcy court can't order them. And both of these are items that affect income.
Right, but the pilot, that's the big issue there, because it's like, if you say like 52 or 53% of our property is off the tax list, how do you as a city function and 48% or whatever
You can't.
of your income? You can't.
You can't.
So there got to be something done about that pilot, and you know, how do we stop the state from taking on more property and leaving us with less? How do we do that?
Well, we can't stop the state from taking on more property. A matter of fact, we've asked them many times to take on more property. We've asked them to take on income-producing property, which was, in my judgment, the biggest mistake that the Segarra administration did.
How do we profit from as a city? How do we profit from that?
Here's the thing. The state, Hartford has 16 and a half square miles. 8 and a half of those square miles are tax exempt. The state owns a lot of it, churches own a lot of it, hospitals own a lot of it, and the city owns a lot of it.
Yeah.
And but the total, and colleges and universities own a lot of it. And those are the five major components of this. What the state gives under its current formula is 42% for colleges and universities. We get money out of that. University of Hartford, there's, you know, millions of dollars that comes to the city by virtue of their payment of the 42% of the tax savings that the University of Hartford has. And then there's Trinity College, and St. Joseph's College has some interest here, and although that's leasehold, so that's not gonna make much of a difference.
Right.
You know, and UConn is here, and UConn Law School. We have a very significant college presence in Hartford. But nowhere near what New Haven has. Yale University is a gold mine for New Haven.
It is. It is.
And Yale University is also a very good corporate citizen, in that in addition to the state reimbursing through pilot 42% of the tax benefit of Yale being there. And you've been to New Haven, you know what those buildings look like. It's one of the most glorious college campuses in the world.
You can tell.
And they also significantly fund the police department in New Haven. You know, we get gifts from Trinity and a small amount from the University of Hartford, but the fact of the matter is that nowhere near what New Haven gets from Yale. None of them can afford it. You know, Yale makes the money that they give to the city of New Haven on their multi-billion-dollar endowment in about 3.5 minutes after Wall Street opens. The state has to recognize, and Hartford isn't alone in this. You know, we're going to be joined very soon by New Britain. New Britain made the same mistakes that we made a couple of years ago, and that's to refund bonds, and that's going to buy them time probably for about another 2 years before their moment of truth hits, and then they've got a crisis. You have New London is already in crisis. Willimantic is in crisis. You have Waterbury is in trouble, not crisis. Waterbury doesn't have a significant state presence. It does have some college presence, hospital presence. Hospitals and colleges pay the most. We benefit from that.
Okay.
State-owned property pays the least. We get clobbered on that one.
Right.
So, and the fact of the matter is, you have to look at one other thing. And that's the ability of the municipality to raise the funds to pay its.
Right. And that's what we're lacking. And there's so many services, you have to, there's so much service need to be provided. And you're saying, you're looking at the revenue. You know, there's a whole lot of things started within the state in general. The fact is that the state are not able to bring in enough revenue. And you know, when we talk about, you know, taxing people and cigarette, taxing people and this, and we tax them out of going somewhere else to buy what they need. And the point is that we're losing those revenues. And what do we do? You know, I was talking to somebody and they said to me, oh, you know, they said Connecticut is the worst place to do any business. We don't make this state a very nice state to make people want to come in and do business. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But it's out there. And the point is, how do we make it more attractive to bring in more people to do business here so we can do all, you know, collect all this money so we can pay our bills?
Depends on what kind of business you're talking about. If you're running a bodega and you want to sell cigarettes,
please.
you got a problem. But if
City of Hartford is full of that.
but understand that there's kind of a bum rap on the state of Connecticut's business taxes. In terms of the business tax, we're about number 12 lowest in the nation. In terms of the total tax, which adds in property tax, we're in the top 15 in terms of taxation, because we have the most burdensome property tax in the nation. Why would anybody want to open up a headquarters or maintain a strong presence in Hartford, Connecticut, and pay 74 mils?
Just ask Aetna.
It's well, I mean, Aetna's going to still have a strong presence in the city. I hope for a long time. I wouldn't bet my life on it, but it's they're going to a valuable asset for a company like Aetna is employment. They could not hire the people that they have working in Hartford in New York City because they couldn't afford comparable space to keep them in. They couldn't afford pay them a wage where they can afford to live proximate to their job.
So moving from Hartford, say going into New York, what does that mean? People are just going to commute?
No. What it means,
how do you keep the money in?
All they're moving are people who are making $1 million, $5 million, $30 million.
Okay.
What would
If I was making $30 million, and I guarantee you I'm not. If I
Close.
I would close, but not there. I would love to live in New York City. I would love living in a place where they cater to people who are making $30 million a year.
Yeah.
They start off by selling me a $22 million
build it.
yeah, home. And they got people at the front desk who
Make sure.
they got people who come up if I need something, and you know.
Okay, so what's the short-term effect of a bankruptcy? What will that do?
Short or long?
What will it do to start getting us back on a stable footing?
What it will do, well, the bankruptcy won't get us on a stable footing. The city council and the mayor have to get us on a stable footing. The bankruptcy will give us the tools
to do it.
Will stop us from having to pay. We're broke. Will stop us from having to pay certain bills during the pendency of this process, and then but we will be then able to pay our police, our firemen, all the
But
others.
those bills don't go away, right? They're just spread out over the.
But that's what bankruptcy is about.
Right.
You have
So
a
it's
right.
not like they say, okay, this is all
Let's
wiped off.
Talk about what happened in Detroit. Pensioners took about a total hit of 6% each. So 6% of the value of what they got. So if they were getting a health package worth $14,000
Or for life.
and well, you know, but I'm talking about on an annual basis.
Okay.
If they were getting that, and if they were getting, like some police fortunately do, $60,000 or $70,000 a year, you may find the total combination of those two things, they may generate about 6% less. There may be an increase in a contribution toward healthcare. I'm a state pensioner. I get a pension of $72,000 a year, and I get my health benefits, and my wife gets them.
For life? Okay.
I'm not going to ask them to give it to me after that.
Okay.
And I don't pay a dime for it.
Right.
But one of the things that you might find is under a plan, change, they increase co-pays. You know, it adds to the cost. They might insist that I make some kind of a contribution toward my spouse if I have a spouse. I mean, everybody doesn't get that, because some people don't have them. I'm blessed with a good one, but it's, you know, you get the truth. But 6% is what it costs the average pensioner in Detroit. It costs the average current employee about 12%. But most of that was not a reduction in wage. It was, again, a copay for pension benefits, a copay for current health care. But it came to a total of about 12%.
You say something about, okay, so it's the city, it's the council and the mayor's responsibility. Where does the state responsibility comes into that?
The state comes into here, if they won't do something about pilot and education, formula do something, not say, okay, this year we'll give you $45 million, it's a gift. They've got to do it as something that guarantees. If we don't get, in my judgment, something equivalent to about $45 million a year, new money from the state, we're not gonna be able to solve this problem. That's the reality.
Right.
They know it. That's where the number came up with this year. I mean, you know, Luke is a smart guy. Matt Ritter is a smart guy. Governor Malloy is a smart guy. I won't speak much about some of the other people in the General Assembly, because I have some questions about some of their thought process. They're all smart guys, and they all know that they've got to be part of the solution here, because they're the ones who took West Hartford away from us. They're the ones, you know, who whacked this thing up.
Yep.
So that
Divided us.
if we had West Hartford, it's still part of Hartford. Forget the fact that we, you know, Stamford would extend us into Farmington. If we had West Hartford, we would have a greater taxable grand list than New Haven or Bridgeport. But you know, if my father used to say, if my ass was a football, you could kick it.
Yeah.
But it's a, you know, it's a.
I want to ask one question here, because people always ask me that. Okay, say for instance, okay, so I have a pension and I start collecting my pension, and I'm making say 20,000 whatever a year, whatever. No, I retire. Okay, how does that affect my pension?
It could.
It could.
Well, let's go into bullet point number 3 here, the pensions and benefits.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the biggest, I think, misinformation or bad information. And a lot of our police officers and firefighters think that,
Thinking that
oh,
they
they're
retire,
coming after my pension.
so I'm leaving.
I'm gonna get screwed, I gotta get out of here. What exactly, I know you can't
How does it
answer
affect them?
specifically, but what would the intent be to either change or look at pensions and benefits as it would affect the city in bankruptcy?
I find it hard to believe
Still have to
that a
negotiate.
plan, no, you have to meet with them, and then you get to put in a recommendation. And they don't get a vote on the recommendation, they can go to the bankruptcy judge and say why they think it's unfair. It's, you know, and there are other things that you can do that I think I mean, you know, Kevin told me the other day that there was an issue with promotion, contractual promotion requirements, where if they don't fill a vacancy, when they finally do, they have to pay whoever they fill it with the back pay to the time it became vacant. You know, I can't believe that the city, if it chooses to, won't be able to convince the bankruptcy judge that that's fair, that to get rid of that. But even if they do, it's only gonna be a very small part of the almost $80 million that we've gotta do.
So what do they look at when they say we want to, you know, and a lot of this has been bad communication, because it came
Or no
across in the
communication.
beginning. Well, exactly. It came across in the beginning that this was a union busting effort by the mayor who wanted to go after police and fire contracts and get rid of these $130,000 pensions, which are few and far between. There's not a lot of them. But
Exactly.
what can they look at in the contracts? And I know we've talked, you know, the
They can look-
retroactive pay was one thing.
It's a small
The fact
thing.
that the fire chief can't close a firehouse without union approval.
But you see, those all relate to this line. This
Yeah.
is the expenditure line. if we can decrease some expenditures, we can significantly lower, then we're in an ability to lower that line, and that's gonna mean ultimately that we're gonna be in much better, excuse me, I had it backwards. This is the expenditure line, this is the revenues line. The revenues are gonna stay the same, but the nuns used to say either fear of God or love of God can get you to heaven. If you can lower your expenditures on an annual basis, then you don't have to make up as much from structural change. But I don't think there's a lot there. I mean, maybe we could take this number with savings in Hartford and reduce it by $7 or $8 million. I hope so. And do that without hurting people.
So what do you think the solutions are, or what are the
Okay, here's
biggest
what- here's what
benefits
I
to a
think-
bankruptcy?
Here's what well, the biggest benefit is everybody has to come in and talk to you. And if they don't choose to talk to you, you can make your
But
unilateral
I haven't seen a
decisions.
big number there that's gonna make a huge difference. The bond,
Sure.
the debt service, things like that can
Bond
all
service.
add up to a little bit,
No,
but
the
it's not
bond,
gonna close
the
a
debt service,
$77 million
the
gap.
debt service, 31% of the bonded indebtedness was excused in Detroit. 31%. We're talking about over $750 million that's costing us now $45,000 a year, and it's gonna go up to $61,000 or $2,000
Yeah,
in 2022.
we-
You take off a third of that, and you save $20 million a year. That's a big number, that's not a little number.
Okay, but let's, and I know you probably don't like getting into hypotheticals, but
No,
let's
I-
just say, for the sake of argument, I'm a union member. I'm a police officer, I'm close to retirement, or I'm getting ready to retire, and you're the mayor. And I came to you and say, you're scaring the hell out of me thinking about my pension and what's gonna happen. Explain to me, put my fears at rest.
This is simple.
What
This
it's
is
gonna do.
simple. I can't put their fears at rest, because it's gonna do something. Because I can't take the money away
But it's
from
not
the
gonna be
bu-
devastating.
No, I can't take the money away from the bondholders if I don't show that there's a contribution from the pensioners and the others. Because the law
Shared
says
sacrifice.
there has to be shared sacrifice, that's right, it doesn't use those words, but that's what it says. It has to be fair to all the stakeholders. And so everybody's gotta tip. The state is not a stakeholder that we can demand something from, except on the basis of fairness and decency and a recognition that they feathered our nest, and then they tell us to go lie in it. And that's not fair. So just look at it. And let's use this number, $77 million. If we got that $20 million in relief, that's $57 million. If we're able to find another, let's say, $5 million in savings, that's $45 million that we're talking about in terms, or $50 million, $57 million, $52 million. Then you get a contribution from a small contribution from pensioners, maybe a slightly larger from the current employees, and the biggest of, and some of that, by the way, may just be in deferring when you can retire. That's a big cost. I mean, we cannot pay full benefits
Right.
for someone for 35 years. There's no way you can, it just doesn't work. Or it will require a bigger contribution toward pensions and some kind of an actuarial reduction if you retire early. But no full pensions after 20 years unless you also, every place in the world has a sum of the parts, number of years and age, has to equal
Right.
78 or.
Now, would it make more sense for him to go to like a 401k type retirement?
I think for some people.
Where you have
it
the
does.
option to pay in, if you wanna, put more in, you can put more in, and
Everybody tells me that I should have been in a 401k instead of we call that a defined contribution as opposed to a defined benefit, which is when you're guaranteed a pension. I gotta tell you, I get my check from the state on on the 26th of each month. And I love my defined benefit plan. I mean, I absolutely love it. I smile every July 26th, or every 26th of the month. The last time I looked at it was July 26th. And I understand why other people might like it. I also know that for almost 15 years, I was the state counsel for TIAA-CREF, which is the organization that ran the college and university pension funds in Connecticut. And we had an awful lot of retirees from the state system, none of whom were making huge bucks, or most of whom weren't making, but were retiring as millionaires. And they had, and the only system in the state universities was a defined contribution. Under a defined contribution, you choose a number. Usually it's capped at something like 5 or 6%. And you have to, you choose what you're gonna match it with. 3 to 6%, minimum of 3. And that amount of money goes directly into your pension every year. And under that system, anybody who doesn't beg, borrow, or steal to put the maximum in to get the maximum out is crazy. Rule of 72s, simple. Take the interest rate that you get over time, divide it into 72, and it tells you the number of years it takes for money to double. So if you have 3% interest, and no pension fund, if a pension fund is paying 3%, it's no good. You have a 3% interest rate, you put it into 72, and your money is gonna double in 14 years. So the dollars you put in year 1 will double in 14 years. And if you don't retire for 20 years, the total amount will double again. The amount you put in next month will double, and then start doubling again. If you get a 6 or 7% return, and when I was on the State Financial Advisory Council, which I did for I think 5 years, I think we used a number then of about 6% as the average return.
Now, do
And
you
you
think,
beat that.
is there a way to accomplish this without a bankruptcy? Or will people not come to the table and talk without the threat of a bankruptcy hanging over their head?
The big problem are the bondholders. You know, and I for one, don't want to shift the burden of paying for this thing onto the shoulders of the pensioners, the employees, the other stakeholders that are there, exclusive of the bondholders. Would they make a contribution? Yes. But look what the bond insurance company suggested the other day. They said that they'd rewrite our bonds so we pay them off over 30 years instead.
But
So
that's
they still make
deferring
their,
again.
they still make their money.
But they make their money back.
Deferring
They
still.
defer, yeah,
Yeah.
and we pay less, and it gets us, you know, over the hump.
Yeah.
When we hit that $61 million figure
Right.
there, it still was gonna be, I
Still
think,
have the
$42
burden
million.
hanging out
The
there.
other big issue, and we hear it all the time, is pilot.
Yeah,
What are the chances, if we had a stronger legislative delegation or more people advocating for Hartford, for the state to finally, and I know they're short on money too, but is there a possibility the state could finally start funding pilot the way it should be? Or would it take a judge to order that?
judge
Or
can't
would-
order it.
You're saying that's
But
why?
there's a statute, can't they be
No,
forced to
the
comply with the
judge
statute?
says subject, the statute says
Yeah.
subject to the appropriation from the state.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
statute says 42% for colleges and hospitals, and 32% for universities, but the amount gets adjusted based on the
Well,
But here's the thing, Clay. If you're gonna deal with the state, I've heard many people, and I think frankly, we had a very effective delegation this year. You know, the fact that they lost 3 Democrats to the Republicans is more a reflection of the time rather than their effectiveness. And there were a lot of Democrats who supported their plan, which was of benefit to us, but it wasn't a problem solver for us. It was there were more Democrats whose towns were going to be hurt by it that voted for it than not. So I mean, we have but here's what I think is going to happen. The plan is the key. You got to come up with a plan that satisfies the court that we've eliminated as much of the waste in our expenditures
Right.
as you possibly can in a human institution. There's
Yeah.
always going to be some.
Yeah.
There's always going to be some. Secondly, we got to convince them that all our stakeholders have contributed, and you got to be able to show that with all these contributions, we're going to knock that number down to a number that is reasonable and projectable into the future to solve our problems structurally. What will it be? My guess is it will be $45 million or less a year. And then you go to me and say, but the plan doesn't work unless we have a commitment from the state of Connecticut. And that's, at that point, I would be aghast if we didn't get support, even if there's a Republican administration.
But we also keep hearing our governor say we can't allow Hartford to go bankrupt. Well, it seems like it's in his hands to fix that if,
No, it's in the legislature's
well,
hands.
yeah.
Yeah.
The budget belongs to the legislature. Governors propose, legislatures dispose. They often talk about the governor's budget, the governor's budget. The fact of the matter is, it's always the legislature's budget. And that's a harsh reality that people are becoming aware of this year. There is that other part of it that's a potential source. You know, the state is generous to us in the educational support, as generous to us as it is to anybody in the state. We get millions of dollars more a year than the next closest, which I think is New Haven. The fact of the matter is that can be mandated by a court to the extent that they can find that the funding is not constitutional so far. Ella Grasso put education in as a state responsibility in 1967. It was never there before that. And when they did it, I don't think they had any idea
What the effect it may
what
have.
the effect it
Well,
may
we're
have.
See, that's the
we're
problem,
almost out of
though.
time.
We do things, we do things, but we don't think about 100 years from now, what effect it will have on the next generation. And that's why we are always
But
in
unless they
trouble.
can get the Constitution amended,
Mhm.
it's there, and it says that education is a state responsibility. And they currently put much more of a burden on the Hartford taxpayer to pay its share, although a smaller percentage than most other towns, than they do on the other taxpayers.
Well, I wanna
Yeah, we haven't
thank you
talked about
for-
too much solution, though. We talked about what's the impact, we talk about all these other things, but what is the solution for the
We're
state
almost out
and
of time, so I just wanna thank you for coming in. Hopefully you put some of the fears at rest from people that have watched this, and, you know, I think there's a lot more talk that needs to be done to explain what's going on. You can't understand all this, a complicated issue, within 55 minutes. So, thank you for coming in.
Can I make one quick recommendation?
Yeah.
Read the letter.
Move to Vermont?
No, read the letter that Luke put out last week in response to his meeting with the bond companies. He touches all these points, and for me, it was great news because he touched it in a way that he has heretofore not spoken about. this
Exactly,
problem.
exactly, and he's
Well,
not
that's-
he's not just gonna continue to do.
Communication is not his strong suit, so let's leave it at that. But I
I meant it as a
appreciate you
compliment.
for- I know, you're always the politician and the statesman, I understand that. But I appreciate you for coming in, and I appreciate the times that we've spent talking where you've tried to explain this to me. It's not something easy for the average person to understand how our government gets to this point, that they've got